Hello and welcome to Review. This time I'm joined with Simon Barrett, who wrote You're Next and The Guests. We're going to be specifically talking about The Guests, but before we get into that, I would like to thank you for You're Next and being at least partially responsible for bringing Barbara Crampton out of acting retirement.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. She's very kind about that. I thought you were going to thank me for the Blair Witch reboot, but that didn't go the way I was expecting.
Why would I do that?
Oh, yeah.
We're here to talk about The Guests, which was your follow-up to You're Next. I'm sure back when you made the movie, you had to do like press stuff and you had your little blurb explaining what the movie was about. Do you remember what that would be?
Yeah.
How do you explain this movie?
Yeah.
We should say we're going to spoil the whole movie. So if you haven't seen it, go out and see it first.
Which chances are really good that you haven't, because I see the numbers. We were like, I had a log line that was like actually pretty good. It didn't necessarily represent the film, but I think like to submit it to Sundance, I wrote but I made it sound like one of those In the Valley of Elah type movies. It's like a grieving family, whose son died in Afghanistan, are visited by a mysterious stranger who tries to improve their lives.
He's here to get.
I think in our mind we were kind of making the good version of those kind of sanctimonious post-Iraq war movies that no one saw except us. That was a whole little subgenre, like Stop Loss, Home for the Holidays is not the one I'm thinking. What's the one?
Is that the Holly Hunter movie?
Yeah, which is actually, the Holly Hunter movie is quite good.
Her character is very similar to the David character in The Guest.
Home for the Holidays, big reference point for The Guest, but no, what's the one with 50 Cent and Jessica Biel?
Is that a thing?
At that point in our career, I was really motivated by this sense of trying to discover a subgenre that I liked in theory but didn't like in practice, and then trying to do something with that. Obviously, with Your Next, it was home invasion films, which I love Eels and The Strangers and stuff like that, but it really felt like that genre hadn't done anything new that wasn't being satirized by funny games back in 1997. And in particular, I remember Colin Geddes, who was a programmer at the Toronto Film Festival, saying that he'd seen 20 films that year that were all about people being tied to chairs. And I was like, well, what if I made a home invasion movie in which no one is tied to a chair? And that was literally the birth of Your Next. I was like, oh, and it'll be more like an Agatha Christie Bring Up Baby type thing. So with The Guest, it kind of was, I was like Adam kind of was grooving on Halloween and Terminator and had this kind of killer robot idea. And meanwhile, I'd had this script which was much more of a depressing indie thing, which is this family whose son dies and a stranger shows up, and what you find out in that script is that he served with their son, but they hated each other, and he murdered their son and has come to take further revenge on him by killing his family. And I got about 60 pages in and then was even I don't want to see this movie. Which is, it was an unusually punishing and depressing script, even for me. And so I just abandoned it, and it was called The Guest, and I decided to not finish it. And that was before we did A Horrible Way to Die. I'd started writing that in I think 2007. And then Adam was I want to do Halloween 3 meets Terminator. And I was how about if, I was I have a great idea. Just give me a few weeks and I'll write it. And then I went back to that script and I threw it out and I started over and I was what if he's Michael Myers meets the Terminator, but played by Dan Stevens from Downton Abbey.
Never let anyone pick on you. Otherwise, you'll carry it with you the rest of your life. And those kids at school, they were bigger than you.
Yeah.
And bring a knife to school. They take it off you and beat you up. You go around their houses at night and burn them down with their families inside. What's the worst they can do?
The hurdle, and I think Adam said this a bunch too, so I might just be ripping off Adam here. The hurdle in the film wasn't believing that he was tough. The hurdle was believing that the family would invite him in. If for example, Jason Statham played that character and he shows up and he's I knew your son, you wouldn't believe for a second that she'd be come stay with me and my teenage daughter.
Yeah.
But Matthew Crawley from Downton Abbey shows up doing a charming, like Kentucky accent.
And I can't help but notice those ladies over there are drinking cheap beer. That seems like a shame to me. I'd like to buy each one of them a blowjob shot.
Do you want to buy anything for their fellas?
Do I look like I'd like to buy something for their fellas?
Well, that's, yeah, no, his performance is really, I mean, that's what makes the movie. And like, yeah, when he comes in at the beginning, he's so charming and they just welcome him. And I love, like, after you're introduced to him, he's introduced to all the family members, and then they're like, oh, go, make yourself comfortable, we'll leave you in this bedroom, and he sits on, just like immediately shuts down.
Yeah. Yeah, that was literally it. Yeah.
Sits on that bed staring at the wall, and that's when you're like, what is up with this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea there was again that like he just wouldn't expend calories if he didn't have to.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to do anything, so he just shuts down. Basically. I mean, there was a draft of the script where he was more overtly. I don't share this often, but it's long enough now that I can start talking about these things. I mean, there was a draft of the script where he was more overtly kind of a cyborg.
Okay.
Where he'd been like injured enough that he was like kind of rebuilt more and was like actually like a little bit robotic, and ultimately it just wasn't the movie that we made. We weren't making like Class of 1999. We were making a film that was every genre except like maybe not musical. There's a lot of music.
I was gonna say it's almost musical. This movie takes place in an alternate reality where everybody listens to synthwave.
I like this music.
You do.
Goth. It was industrial, like goth. For some reason, I'd written into the script. So this, again, I'm from a fairly small town, and Adam's from a fairly small town. And one thing that we were obsessed with is how in small towns you can be kind of a subculture of one. Like you can through random things, especially now with the internet, you can be like the one, I don't know, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan in like Otley, Iowa, and like that's your thing, and but nobody else knows what the hell you're talking about. And so, for the character of Anna, we just were kind of like, she kind of doesn't want to be there anymore, and like, but she has to stick around because her family's a wreck. And like, how would we express that? And it's like, she should just really be into like goth industrial music from the 80s. Like one of the unique ways Adam and I work is we give each other kind of a lot of creative space, because we just are good friends and we trust each other. So Adam usually has no idea what I'm writing when I'm writing it in terms of like plot or character or anything. But obviously if he's going to direct a film, obviously if he sees the script and doesn't like it, he doesn't have to direct it. That hasn't happened yet, fortunately. But I want to show him like a finished script that I'm pretty happy with, so he can react to it like a viewer would. And similarly, I stay out of the editing room until he has a fairly complete cut, so that I can approach it with fresh eyes and be kind of like, actually, I don't think we need this scene anymore, because he's been working for 7 days to get that scene perfect, and maybe, it's a way to utilize the fact that there's two of us. But with this particular film, Adam and I were both really, we kind of both clicked on this idea, and I was like, I've got it, just give me a couple weeks, and Adam would just start sending, like, he wouldn't ask me anything, he wouldn't put pressure on me to be like, can you give me a hint, like, what's it about, but he would be like, are you making a movie that can have this song in it? Are you writing a movie that can have this song in it? Are you writing an action scene that can have this song in it?
Haunted by your soul.
Almost all those songs ended up. We were very lucky. Our producer on that film, Keith Calder, is very good at somehow convincing people to give you their music for not a lot of money.
Well, that collaboration between the two of you is interesting, because like you were saying, you kind of had a script that was like a post-war thing.
It was like a pretentious failure.
And Adam Wingard wanted to make a schlocky Terminator movie, and I think that's reflective in the movie, because it kind of, much like your next, it kind of starts as one thing and gradually becomes something else.
Oh shit!
Yeah, and some people like that and some people don't. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of it. It was like we had this first act that really, especially because the film did premiere at Sundance, The Guest, you know, you could tell in the theater, you know, it was the first time really anyone had seen the movie, and you could tell for the first 20, 30 minutes, people were just like, this is from like the You're Next guys? Like, I thought this was gonna be like mildly enjoyable.
When somebody had a blender shoved down their head.
I would say that's something I really love. I'm a huge Jackie Chan fan, and I love movies that have an escalation to them. Yeah. And I love movies that do transform and build to something. And you know, The Guest, you know, once I wrote the ending, I was like, well, this goes completely off the rails. But like, if we can earn this, if we can totally make a film that like earns this.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It gets increasingly more, I guess, silly, more absurd, less realistic.
I would say so.
But the tone never changes. It's like it's never winking at you.
Well, you can tell, like when again, spoilers. When he kills the parents, we lose a lot of people. For us, we were like, no, we still think this is funny. But we were trying to, you know, actually Survive, one of the artists that we used in The Guest, you know, does Stranger Things, does the score for Stranger Things, I believe. And I think the Duffer Brothers have said in interviews that they discovered that music from watching The Guest. And there's some kind of shared DNA there, because like one of the things I always liked about those 80s movies is that the kids always know what's going on and the parents are always clueless. And I always thought there was something really fun about that. And that was something we wanted The Guest to be. You know, we knew we were doing an 80s homage with all the Halloween and Terminator stuff, but we didn't want to set it in the 80s. We didn't want to stylistically make an homage, because that, to me, is just, you know, people have done it before.
Yeah.
But it's fun, to me, like the right way to do an homage is to take like, you know, kind of familiar ingredients and try to find a new spin on them. To me, like, it was important that the parents be, like, at best, kind of just like irrelevant to the narrative of The Guest. Like at best, they're just kind of like clueless, and at worst, they're kind of actively like a toxic factor in their kids' lives, though well-meaning, because I didn't want it to be like a depressing film.
He's in the photograph of Caleb's squad. You saw the photograph.
You know what?
He was
What
not a
if he
stranger.
has the PTSD or whatever it's called?
I like Leland Orser as the dad.
He's so good.
Whenever I see him, all I can think about is his brief scene in Seven.
He made me do it. He put that thing on me. Then he told me to fuck her. And I did. I fucked her.
It's like bone chilling.
Yeah, which I think is like one of his first roles.
Yeah.
And it's like, and everyone knows him from that, and now he's in the Taken movies.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
I've never seen any of those. Does he get taken?
No, he well, maybe he gets taken in the third one. I sorry, Leland, I bailed at a certain point. He's one of like Liam Neeson's drinking buddies.
Okay.
Who tells other
Until he gets taken.
Yeah.
But as the dad, I like you said, he's kind of clueless, and there's like the part when he's complaining to Anna about her no good boyfriend, and he just sounds so out of touch.
I'm 20 years old. I can date who I want.
As long as you live in this house, you can.
Oh, you know nothing about him. Nothing.
I know he's a drugged out punk junkie who started
Really,
dating
Dad?
my daughter when she was 17 years old, is what I know.
He's a wonderful actor, and again, someone that I hope to work with for the rest of my career. He's just fantastic. But he also is like unusually good at getting very silly while still grounding it in somewhat of a reality.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. His scenes are very funny, but he's playing it completely serious.
Yeah, I mean, just the way he asks David continually if he wants a drink.
Yeah.
David, we're very happy to have you here. I'm gonna have a beer before dinner. Can I offer you one?
Oh, no, thank you.
No, okay? Suit yourself. David, sure can't get you a beer? Let's have a couple more of these to celebrate. I need a drink.
Well, what happened?
I'm getting a drink, honey.
Which, like, you know, in the script it was written that his character Spencer is an alcoholic, but it was fairly subtle.
Yeah.
I wanted it to, again, be kind of realistic to what that is, which is just here's a guy who, like, clearly has a problem. But yeah, it became like a bit for him at, like, the constant drinking thing.
Yeah.
Like, it gave him a lot of wiggle room to do kind of funny things.
Your wife seems to respect you, sir.
Oh, yeah. It's what it is, you know?
I think like The Guest was like finally people were kind of like, oh, this is this very specific like sense of humor that they have, and either I like it or I don't. And I certainly don't begrudge anyone who doesn't think we're funny and thinks we're annoying. I have several people in my personal life who feel that way. But that was like with the Guest, we were like, this is really funny, and then like someone would be like, how or why is it funny? There's like no jokes, and we're like, look at what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to like, and The Guest isn't exclusively this, but there's an aspect of it where it's like B-movie homage.
Oh yeah.
And people expect like, I don't know, like Planet Terror, like the Robert Rodriguez, where it's way more overt.
Yeah.
And it feels like they're not even taking the project seriously.
But that again falls in that category of what we were just talking about, which is homages that are stylistic homages, which I just don't like. Like if you're putting like fake grain on a movie or something like that, it's just like I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I mean, you can do a grain pass on a digital film; it actually looks quite good. But like
you're not adding scratches and
hairs
in the
or if you're
gate.
shooting something like specifically to make it look like a film of that era, I just don't know what the point is because there are so many films of that era.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like just a very lazy thing that's become kind of fashionable in particularly in indie genre filmmaking. Is this like this is like from this looks like it's from the 70s kind of, except we shot it on like a shitty prosumer camera for some reason.
Well, that's something I wanted to mention is The Guest came out in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I could think of that really reminded that I felt like had a similarity in terms of like style or music choice was like Drive. And I saw people compare it to Drive, even though the two movies are nothing alike. But I think it's just the music and the fact that Dan Stevens kind of has a Ryan Gosling look to him.
Yeah.
But when I saw The Guest, I was like, oh man, this is right up my alley. Like the visual style of the movie, all the music and all the Halloween stuff, and then, but it felt like fresh and different. And now you have like Stranger Things doing like I didn't even realize that was the same. People doing the music.
Steve Moore did the score for The Guest, who's from the band Zombie, but we had a track by Survive.
But yeah, now I mean, since The Guest, there's so many of these. Like, we have synthwave on the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, now everything has that Carpenter.
It looks like an
score.
'80s movie.
Yeah, I want to be clear. When we used the Carpenter font for The Guest, that was before every other movie had done that. But yeah, like now people figured out that like that '80s kind of style synth score is like, kind of instantly compelling in certain ways, but to me, it's kind of frustrating because I think that's such a specific thing.
Yeah.
And I don't, you're not going to see like Adam or I do that, I think, again. I mean, we certainly might work with Steve Moore again. He's a wonderful composer. But like for that particular film, Steve was actually using like the specific equipment because he's like tracked it down and bought it that like John Carpenter used to write the score to Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Oh.
Like he's using the exact keyboards.
Oh, wow.
Like this antique equipment. We really were like, and I mean, Steve didn't do that for our film. We didn't give him nearly enough money to do that. But he had done that on his own, and Adam was kind of like, I want you to use, like, that's what I want you to use. So we were really trying to be very authentic, little realizing that we were like the death knell of a creatively bankrupt industry. And Nick Refn, by the way, absolutely totally like razzed us. He totally like razzed us for ripping off Drive, but like
it's nothing like Drive. I've seen people compare it, and I don't
we
get
were
it.
way in production on The Guest before. like I mean, we'd seen Drive.
Well, if you ever want to feel better about that, look up the interview that William Friedkin did with Nicholas Winding Refn.
I have no regrets about Only God Forgives. I think it's a masterpiece, and it is. I just didn't make it very expensive.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Do you see our interview with Nick Refn?
No.
Oh, Nick Refn went full Friedkin on us.
Well, Friedkin went full Friedkin.
We found out that we were just part of a cycle of bullying.
I just didn't make it.
If you think that's a masterpiece, what is Citizen Kane?
It's great. But it was an inexpensive movie.
But at the time we were just like, why is Nick Refn being so mean to us? We really like his work.
You know who else likes his work? Him.
Well, is that I didn't get that from the fact that his name is imprinted on his titles and often obscures them.
It works perfectly for Neon Demon, though.
He's a lovely guy, and I love his work.
His initials at the beginning
like
of
the
Neon
little
Demon.
monogram.
It looks it looks like a perfume ad. It makes sense for that movie.
No, I mean Adam and I are fans from like the first Pusher. Like Nick Refn's work is one of those things that we like bonded over. So even though he totally was really mean to us, it was like getting interviewed to him was like a complete honor. And then we found out that he was kind of like passing the torch in this like William Friedkin, and also apparently Lars von Trier also was. There's also apparently somewhere out there a Lars von Trier interview with Nick Refn, where Lars von Trier is also very rude to him. Lars von Trier also notorious for putting his name in huge letters superimposed over the titles of his films.
You can do that if you're a big weirdo.
Well, and then or John Carpenter's.
You can do that if you're John Carpenter.
Yeah, that I agree with.
So financially,
who gives a shit?
Speaking of John Carpenter, with The Guest, I would say aesthetically there's some obviously kind of influence from John Carpenter, It doesn't feel like story-wise that was the case. What were any like sort of specific influences story-wise?
Again, this goes back to like wanting to take your inspiration from films in a way that's not like just a direct, obvious thing. In some ways, I kind of feel like The Guest is kind of a remake of Halloween, but it's very inverted. And one of the things, that I remember Adam talking about when we were first, discussing the project in kind of broad terms is, we'd just done our Masked Killers movie, and we wanted like to do the inverted Michael Myers, where Michael Myers is literally called like the Shape because he's wearing that, kind of notoriously spray painted William Shatner mask, and there's just nothing. He's a total blank.
Yeah.
But what if your killer is someone who's nothing but their face?
Yeah.
What if they're
super likable?
What if your killer is all charm?
All your guns.
If you brought money for all of them, I'll cut you a deal. You can take them all off my hands.
No, I'm going to kill you.
Hey, what the fuck, David?
Like psychopaths in real life, kind of notoriously are. They're very charming people, and that to us was very interesting. And again, there's specific things we're doing. There's there's props in The Guest that are very specifically references to Halloween 3.
But that's the thing is, like you say, the build up of the movie. Like by the time you get to that point, when you're at the haunted maze at the end, you're like, you can get away with that.
Yeah, Tom Hammock, our production designer, really got to have some fun with that stuff. But what really was like, there was a weird mandate of like, we want as much as possible. We want as many references to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch as we can possibly put in a film without ever like calling attention to itself.
Well, the fact that it's set around Halloween, I mean, those just
Yes.
look like they could be generic
But
Halloween
Halloween in
decorations.
New Mexico, which is just this, because we weren't filming it in the fall, and there's something also about like I like seasons that don't look like they're supposed to, like holidays that don't look right.
Yeah.
But I'd originally written it for the Pacific Northwest to be kind of like foggy and isolated, and it would be Halloween.
Yeah.
With this damp, like gray look. But still no leaves on the ground, none of the like staples of how Halloween like looks in films. And then when we found out that New Mexico was a lot cheaper, it was like, oh, well, it'll just be more like a Western now. It'll just be these blank, scorched like landscapes,
Yeah.
and it'll be like, oh, it's like late October, but it still looks like July. And also, of course, we filmed it in July.
Well, that's what's great is, I mean, just it's still, even in that setting, it still feels very like Halloween season with all because it's like an overabundance of Halloween decorations everywhere, which I love because, I mean, I love Halloween. So
yeah, me too. Well,
that season
us too, obviously, yeah.
And it's great too because like the movie doesn't necessarily need to be set around Halloween, but just by doing that, it adds a little, extra flavor to the movie.
I love the idea of Halloween. As I get older, Halloween just means a night that I turn off my lights so that kids won't knock on my door. But yeah, but I love movie Halloween.
Sure.
Like that's what I love.
That heightened. Well, it's also nice that The Guest is, because that's, I mean, it like immediately became one of my like go-to October movies.
Yeah.
And it's one of the rare ones that is like a Halloween season movie that you can watch that isn't a horror movie. I mean, it kind of is, there's slasher elements, but it's not like a horror film. So it's like you and Hocus Pocus, and I'm not watching that shit.
It makes me sick.
Adam and I would both say that The Guest is very minimally a horror film, but we obviously wanted it to have like suspense and horror elements. If anyone is scared by The Guest, I'm astonished. But also we were really surprised that some people found Your Next intense. We really thought we just made a very, goofy black comedy.
I want you to truck down this bed next to your dead mom.
What?
One thing that I think is interesting about the movie that would probably maybe frustrate some people is you keep waiting throughout the whole movie, you're waiting for the exposition dump. And it never really happens. There's a couple little like allusions to things, but you never really know what his character is up to or what his backstory is. They mentioned something about an experiment at one point, and there's a moment that almost feels like you're trolling the idea of giving exposition when he's in the kitchen with the mom.
I really am sorry about this, Mrs. Peterson. I'm afraid I haven't been fully honest with you.
What do you mean?
It would take too long to explain.
That was an intentional kind of joke, because what had happened, truthfully, is in the script I'd written quite a bit of exposition.
See, that's what I was wondering, if there was more originally.
Both in that scene and also later, there's a scene with Lance Reddick. He's driving Micah to get her brother.
Maybe you shouldn't have tested your procedures on a psychopath.
By all accounts, he was an ideal soldier. I don't know.
And that was originally a much longer scene. And what we kind of discovered, not even in a filming phase, but just like really when we were talking to Keith and Jess about the script and really going through it, is we were just like, no one's gonna want this. Like, we don't need this. No one's gonna want it. Like it's better if we give, like, we can say, like, between us, we know this is what this character's backstory is, and so there's a coherent logic to what he does and to what we're gonna tell Dan to do, and how we're gonna tell Dan to, like, do his readings. But as long as the audience feels that there's consistency to these choices, they're gonna wanna come up with their own stuff. I mean, a surprising amount of people, and this wasn't intentional, have come to me and suggested that he is in fact the dead brother, that he's had, like, plastic surgery or something, and that David is Caleb. Caleb's the name of the family's son who died, who David made the promise to check in on their family.
Yeah.
And like, our take on it was that's entirely sincere. David is entirely sincere in his mission.
Well, that's kind of how I interpret it, and I was always curious about that, like, because he's helping the family out.
He's helping them, but
he helps the dad get a promotion by killing his boss.
To me, the Luke character arc, the younger brother played by Brendan Meyer, wonderful actor as well, tells the true story of David as well as you can, which is David helps Luke in a very specific way.
Yeah.
You killed Dad's boss too, right? I don't care. I'm not going to say anything.
Why not?
Because we're friends.
Which is he tells Luke to be a violent person and to solve his problems with violence, and ultimately gives Luke a knife, which Luke uses to stab David.
Right.
And David's like, great,
gives him the thumbs
you
up.
did it.
I don't blame you. Don't feel bad.
Like, you've learned what I was trying to teach you, which is this world is a hellish, violent place, and your parents don't matter, and I killed them for you, don't worry. They were just a problem.
Right.
And, like, great job, guys. And you know, the legacy that the film's had has been really satisfying, because I think, you know, initially we kind of felt like we'd failed, like, with The Guest. Like, we'd kind of made our Magnolia. We'd had, like, our first real somewhat mainstream success with You're Next, which was a movie that we made for about $700,000 in my hometown. And we hoped that it would get out there in the world, and it did. And we were very proud. And we suddenly had the opportunity for the first time ever in our careers. We weren't just thinking, like, what can we get made, but what do we want to make? Like, what story do we want to tell? And that was what we came up with. And then we were kind of like, oh, maybe we should never do this. And it actually is worth mentioning, you know, that we signed up to do Blair Witch before we started making The Guest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'd already signed up to do that film with Lionsgate. We were kind of like, well, we're gonna have to take some time off. We're going to make this movie called The Guest. And they're like, oh, that's fine. They just wanted to work with us because they liked working with us on Your Next, and we liked working with them. So I was like, oh yeah, absolutely, we'll do a Blair Witch sequel for you guys. That sounds fantastic. Like, we're just gonna go off and do this other thing real quick.
Yeah.
And so, in a weird way, though, like, the response to those two films in particular has made me realize that, like, no, we were right. We should keep making weird original movies. We just need to make sure that they somewhat make a profit. Like, we should make sure that there's someone in there for someone, because we don't just want to keep making these cult movies of the future. We want to make movies that people actually see when they come out.
Well, the more confused people are when a movie initially comes out, that's the more likely it's going to be a cult movie down the line.
But that's not a satisfying thing if you're a filmmaker. I mean, we like Adam and I so often have been asked this, like we love you guys because you make these cult movies, and it's like, all you're really saying to us is that our movies are failures. like people don't see them, and then people do see them, and they're like, oh yeah, Your Next wasn't nearly as bad as everyone said it was. I mean, like, thanks so much, but like, you know, it would have really helped if you'd gone to see it in theaters. You know, and oh man, I can't tell you how many people ask me if we're ever going to do a sequel to The Guest.
I was just about to jokingly say, so, sequel?
Yeah, I mean, like, jokingly you say that, but like...
Well, the movie has sequel bait ending, but I assume that was a joke.
No, you know, look, it speaks for itself. It's the same thing that we were talking about with the exposition.
Yeah.
It's like, why would we ruin this? Like, if you like it, why would we spoil it? Like, it would just, why would we pander to the vocal 10% of fans that are pestering us for a sequel and infuriate the silent 90% that just kind of like the movie and want to be left alone? And like, don't want us to milk it again and again and again and try to sell them, you know, Guest t-shirts, though we did actually do that, to be fair.
Is that Cavity? Not Cavity
Colors, yeah.
Fright Rags, I get those two.
Yeah, Cavity Colors, those guys are reached out and were friendly, and we liked their art, so we're like, heck yeah.
I bought one of their Boglin pins.
Is that a pin of a Boglin?
It is.
Where the fuck did you get a pin of a Boglin?
For us, it's just like, hey, we truly, I don't think we don't see any money from that. That's just like a fun thing for the fans. It's like, and that's to me the right way to do it. It's like, hey, if you like the film and you want a T-shirt of it, we're not gonna like deny you that, but we're also not gonna like try to profit from your fandom. We came close to doing The Guest as a TV series with a studio that was interested, and that would have been more like Banshee maybe, for example, where it's about like he takes over a town and like runs for mayor and stuff, but he's like killing his opponents and stuff. That might have been kind of creatively interesting, but ultimately all these things just kind of fizzled out because they just weren't right. It's like I'd rather, at the end of the day, I'd rather try to come up with another original idea and make another original film and do something different. And if it's successful or not, I've learned that people will still pester me for a sequel. And we made a sequel to VHS. There you go.
And then they made a third one.
Yeah. Well, yeah.